and welcome to the roads of the beautiful Ardennes in Belgium. This is the Fleche Wallonne, a race of 200 kilometres. There's only one high spot that everybody talks about, and that is the Wall of Huy, where the riders finish on top of this brute of a climb and also have to pass over it twice before they even finish the race. We've been over the climb once. I'm joined by Paul Schoen alongside me, and Paul is an 18-man breakaway, unusually so, has got away first time up the climb.
Well, it's always a strange race, the Fleche Wallonne, because it's in between two different classics. We had Paris-Roubaix last weekend, Liège-Bastogne-Liège this weekend. It's also a change of riders for the first time too. You see a lot more of the French riders, the Italian riders, the climbers coming into their own. So it's a little bit difficult to force yourself too much before Liège-Bastogne-Liège, especially if you want to go out there and look about winning the oldest event on the international calendar, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, which is why sometimes you'll get a group of 15 or 20 riders going clear. But I think for the moment, this kind of group has gone out far too early.
Well, funnily enough, this is one classic the Belgians don't have too much of a say in. They've never won Fleche Wallonne since 1988, and that was the victory then by Claude Quillion. Since then, the Italians, the French, and last year, of course, Lance Armstrong of the United States was the winner. Now, let's have a look. We've got Stéphane Herlot, the French champion, on the far side, and the Francais de Jeu team are here. That looks like Andrea Perron, ex-Motorola rider, of course. And the Cofidis team have got their men up here, and that is Tony Rominger. It's good to see Rominger. A different type of rider comes to this event, the Fleche Wallonne, than would attend the other classic races, Tour of Flanders and the Paris-Roubaix, because this course suits them in their preparation for the upcoming big tours, Tour of Italy and of course the Tour de France. Michael Bogart is up here too, and there's Bjarne Riis in the Danish Championship jersey. So it's a strong move, but the big peloton moving equally as quickly just now, and maybe 18 riders is probably a little bit too unruly to stay away right down to the finish. There's a few small foothills before they get back round to Huy and then up the climb again.
I think more important to note, Phil, not a very heavy presence there of the Once squad. Laurent Jalabert and Alex Zoulet for the moment trapped in this main field, and you can see the pressure is certainly being put on, and they want to pull this all back together, because we're now going into the critical, crucial phase of the Fleche Wallonne, where they go out and they ride some very tough hills before coming back to the Mur de Huy for the final time.
Well, the only great tragedy, I suppose, regarding the Fleche Wallonne is it doesn't count in the World Cup. It's very much a World Cup type of classic race, but its proximity to the Liège-Bastogne-Liège, which Paul has said is the oldest professional classic in being, and they get the credit of being the World Cup counter. This used to be the first leg of the Ardennes weekend here in Belgium, and they still have the Ardennes prize for the best placed rider in both events. Now there's a little bit of shuffling around at the bottom there, and it looks like Axel Merckx is turning the screw a little bit tight at the front.
Well, Axel going to be very happy, because I'm sure Papa is alongside in that red car at the moment watching the race. He normally takes out a day from his heavy schedule to follow Axel whenever he races in Belgium, and this, in fact, the Fleche Wallonne, is the race where Axel first rode his best ever, I think, one-day classic. He attacked consistently to prove that he was able to really compete at the highest international level, and then he continued that ascending form last year when he finished 7th in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But now we get a chance to see riders like Claudio Chiappucci coming into his own. These are the kind of races that he can certainly perform well in.
Well, the whole field has come up behind here, because Chiappucci is the head of the main chase. And now we've got a counter-attack going off on the road here, and this looks to me as though it's David Rebellin. He really came to the fore last year as leader of the Tour of Italy. Had a great tour last year until he finally lost the battle to Pavel Tonkov. But he too has changed teams this year. A lot of riders have moved around. There's Merckx. Those big, long, thin legs. He's nothing like the shape of Dad, is he, really? But he is starting to come through as a pretty good professional bike rider, which is a great relief, because Eddie never pushed him to be a bike rider, and I think he was even a little bit surprised when Axel said he wanted to be a pro cyclist.
We started off playing football for Anderlecht, the junior squad, and he felt the pressure too much trying to keep fit and keep on the top 11 in that game of soccer, so he decided to go to cycling, and I think he must be feeling an awful lot of pressure now, because he is being regarded as one of the leaders of the Polti team. But Phil, this is the first time we get a chance really to see the riders that we normally see at the Tour de France. Riders like Richard Virenque, Claudio Chiappucci, and it was interesting to see, in fact, Bjarne Riis now slowly starting to come to form. He's had a very quiet season so far, but he's beginning to put himself right for his attack at winning the Tour de France for a second time.
Well, there's the long line. We're still about 70 kilometres from the actual finish of the race, but the big obstacle is the 2 climbs still to come of the Muir de Huy, as the main field have tagged on to the back, but our helicopter staying at the nose of the peloton and trying to reorganise themselves. Well, without the big Oncé riders up there, I guess the break was never going to get a successful lead, because... Oh, and there's somebody gone into the wall there. He completely overshot. I don't know who it was, Paul, but he seemed to totally misjudge that bend and went straight into the house.
I think the fault really was because of the motorbike. The motorbike came into the corner a little bit too quickly as well, and he was surprised. The rider was following the line of the motorbike, which is quite often what they do. I remember Sean Yates saying to me on occasions he's ridden time trials looking at the preceding motorbike, and he can understand from the way the motorbike tilts left or right just how fast he can go into the corner. A chance here to have a look again at exactly what happens. You see, the motorbike does actually overshoot the corner there. It's a big heavy motorbike, and it's a lotto rider. He's gone into the front door maybe to stop for a cup of tea.
Well, I think he's okay. A little bit embarrassed probably, and a little bit of a shock for the person watching on the doorstep there, but it happens. Anyway, we continue on through the beautiful towns here, which are sprinkled over the hills of the Ardennes. This is a very, very nice part of Belgium, and totally different in its character. They're also French-speaking here, by the way, than to Flanders, where they speak a Flemish, which is a type of Dutch language, and that's the other side of the country.
Interesting to see number 62, Maurizio Fondriest. He's having a very hard time this year, just trying to find his form. In fact, if you remember, a couple of years ago, he had an operation on his back for a discal hernia. He came back and was very successful indeed, but he's been dogged since the start of this season, since Tirreno Adriatico, with that problem. So it's good to see him up and racing again, but once you start to get problems like that, it is very difficult to overcome them.
Well, 5 riders trying to re-establish a move here. The 18 have been brought back. Now the pack is beginning to reshuffle, and Lotto have still got men in the breakaway despite that little hesitation when they made the right-hand bend down there, and riders willing to have a go. Claudio Chiappucci particularly has started to take an interest in the front end of Fleche Wallonne. It's his sort of race, and he does seem to be having a little bit of good form this year, Claudio Chiappucci. This rider here is Thierry Marchal from the Sedeco team.
Local team based in Charleroi, in the French-speaking part of the country. This is Laurent Madouas on the front riding for Lotto. Strange to see him in the red and black jersey of the Belgian squad, but he came across too after the demise of Motorola last year. Many of those teams, the riders from that team, have split up and gone their different ways, and interesting, I think, to see the performance of Laurent Madouas a little bit later this year when he goes to the Tour de France, because he didn't have the kind of Tour de France I would have expected him to perform like last year. But this year, with a little bit more liberty, he could well perform as well as he has done in the past and move into a top 10 place.
Well, a lot of riders are relying on a good Tour de France this year. There's no doubt about that. There's been a lot of movement among the teams, and in fact the riders now are trying to stretch this race as they start the long climb here. There's plenty of these little climbs, and they're usually on good roads. There's not many roads with cobblestones down here, but the climbs are quite steep, and the riders, especially in the professional peloton, really attack them at a great speed. This is the back of the field here that we're looking at now, and rider on the left of our picture, Bjarne Riis, is just looking after his form and bringing himself onto form, he hopes, rather nicely. And there's a little attack going away here at the moment as the riders now start to move on. This is Alessandro Bartolini from the MG team. He sits pretty far forward, right on the nose of his saddle there, as he tries to pull the best out of those legs on the climb.
Well, these riders all looking for a great performance. This is the time when you have to try and attack to break everything up. That's Laurent Jalabert in the yellow jersey of Oncé. So things starting to become a little bit more serious now. Jalabert moving to the front to take control. You can see the way he sits very firmly on his saddle there, using a huge gear, and now a lot more of those yellow jerseys of Oncé moving to the front. That looks a little bit like the shape of Alex Zula moving up there as well. So Oncé starting to take a more serious interest in this Fleche Wallonne.
And the big field is thinning out violently now as the Oncé start to attack. And I'm wondering if this is in fact Patrick Jonker who's trying to go clear here. We'll get a closer look at him in a minute. But Jonker is a rider in the Oncé colours who is trying very hard. In fact, I think it's Jalabert who's going.
Jalabert going clear there. In fact, the man at the front who's launching that attack looks to me more like Luc Leblanc, the Frenchman. So it's going to be a French day today, because Leblanc waited for the field to come all back together there. And there's always been a little bit of rivalry between Leblanc, Jalabert and Richard Virenque, all looking to make themselves the top Frenchmen. But they're all a different style of rider. But Leblanc, when it comes to these short, explosive climbs, can certainly open up a gap. And these riders have moved quite insignificantly away from the rest of the main field.
Well, Jalabert's taken his time in coming. It is the little dancing figure of the former world champion, Luc Leblanc. We've got Alex Zülle coming up at the front as well now. Alex also has great form. It is a strange, really, the way that the two top riders in the world are both riding for Once, and these keep switching around as the world's #1 best placed rider. Alex Zülle getting the first major stage race win of his career last year when he landed the Tour of Spain, and then he went on to become a world champion as well. And so Alex Zülle is beginning to be something special now. He came to the Tour de France a few years ago now in the early 90s and celebrated his birthday in the yellow jersey, and then promptly retired on the rest day, as he always planned to do, to wait till he was a little bit stronger before he would go the full distance in the Tour. And since then, as we all know, he's had a fine second place in that race.
Well, he's had a great start to the season so far too, with 2 victories under his belt. One of those, the overall victory in the Tour of the Basque Land, the Pays Basque. So obviously in great shape, looking for a good performance in the Ardennes Classics. There is a special competition here between the 2 events, the Fleche Wallonne and Liège-Bastogne-Liège. It's called the Weekend Ardennaise, and in fact Lance Armstrong ran out the winner in that competition last year. It looks again as if Jalabert has decided to take the race by the horns, and he's going to the front, putting the pressure on. He has the power to open up the gaps here, but he's chased quite vigorously by one of the Asics rider. Looks very much like the shape of Claudio Chiappucci.
So the devil is seeking out Laurent Jalabert. Jalabert just still not forcing himself all of the way here. He's just tapping along, waiting to see who comes up and joins him. He's clearly decided it's not the wisest move to go away this far from the finish. We've still got another climb in the Puy to come, and Chiappucci tried to reach him. Well, having said he's just tapping along, it looks as though the 2 behind have got themselves quite a problem in trying to reach Jalabert at the moment.
May well be Enrico Zaino. It looks like Claudio Chiappucci, a very compact climbing style, but these riders know now that when Jalabert goes to the front, it's not to play around. This is a serious move by Laurent Jalabert, looking over his shoulder to see if anybody can get to his wheel. Keeps the pressure on though, out of the saddle with a huge gear in at the moment. The picture breakup is because we're going through the forested area of the Ardennes, and that's why we get a bit of breakup with the link, the microwave link from the helicopter down to the motorbike there. You can see riding alongside Laurent Jalabert at the moment. Jalabert at the moment seems to be going away on his own.
And Laurent Jalabert constantly looking over his shoulder as 2 riders try to hunt him down. And slowly but surely they're doing just that. We're going to get 3 riders together here. Pretty narrow stretch of road as we're right deep into the countryside of the Ardennes just at this moment. We come back into the industrial area around about Puy very shortly. The main field behind, what's left of it, and it's only the strongest surviving this race today. It is a very quick race indeed, and the main field have not really been in this race because it's been splitting up very early on. Jalabert making it pretty hard for everybody in and out of the saddle. And I think, in fact, it is Enrico Zaino who's trying to come across. He was 6th in this race last year and runner-up in the Giro d'Italia. That'll be at the forefront of his mind for when that starts in May.
It's amazing the power that Jalabert has here. He knows that he's just going to keep the pressure on till he gets to the top of this climb and hope that the other riders who are coming across behind him will crack, because nobody's in his slipstream. The motorbikes carrying the cameraman, trying to get out of the way so they don't have any effect on the course. And in fact, Luc Leblanc is coming across here. That's remarkable. One Frenchman chasing another. Leblanc, I think, after a lot of bad luck through his season, looking for a good end to his career. He may well have just one more year left in his legs. There is Enrico Zaino riding for Asics on the same team as Claudio Chiappucci coming across. But the main field, or what's left of it, is not very far behind these riders, and they must surely start to organise themselves to pull it all back together.
So 3 pretty strong riders have got themselves together now. Leblanc is one of the best racing cyclists, and I mean that because he loves to just get on his bike and race and cause pain to everybody around him. He's a real aggressive rider, Luc Leblanc, and it's unusual to see a Frenchman settling in on an Italian team, and I suppose we could say it's unusual in the case of Jalabert to see a Frenchman settling in on a Spanish team. But that's the way the world is now with cycling, and these two riders racing for teams from the countries different to the one in which they live. And in fact, Paul, those two that have come up has caused this slowing down at the front, and it's caused a little bit of a spur behind, because it looks as though that group of around about 15-16 riders just getting off the front of the next group is coming up pretty fast.
And the whole of the field is not too far behind either. It looks like it's the Batik Del Monte new squad which has taken over the former Gewi's team, trying to chase at the front, but there's no organised chase. There's Bjarne Riis in the jersey there, the red one with the white cross on it, and now the man deciding that he wants to bring back all of the Frenchmen, Richard Virenque. So a Frenchman chasing two other Frenchmen is quite strange to see in the world of international cycling, but there's a great rivalry between these top French cyclists.
And particularly so between Virenque and Jalabert. And Virenque has often been the cause of the downfall of Laurent by causing the reaction, and it looks as though he may have done it just once more time here, because he's bringing the field back. Alex Zula is still poised in the wings to possibly attack on the capture of these three riders. And Bjarne Riis is showing us his first real sign of form this year, the man who has vowed he will win the Tour de France again this summer, having become the first Danish rider to get the Tour de France last year. And we've seen already Rolf Sørensen, the first Dane to win the Tour of Flanders this year. The Danes are having a marvellous period in cycling. It's become a major sport in their country. It's now their number one sport, and wherever they race in Denmark there are literally tens of thousands of spectators. And so it's nice to see that the small country turning out at the moment so many good bike riders. There's Zaina, Luc Leblanc.
Interesting to see that Luc Leblanc, in fact, wearing your favourite number, Phil, number 51.
Yeah. 51 because he's won the Tour de France more times than any other number. Number 11 is the second most popular number. You get no choice on the number you wear, but of course it's the number you're given. But the rider who gets 51 is always pretty happy.
Looks like there's a serious chase starting to take form here. You can see the blue and white jerseys of the Festina squad there, mixing it up at the front, trying to pull it all back together. They realise we're now in a very crucial phase of this race. Pascal Hervé from France as well is in there with his teammate Richard Virenque. And now it's the turn of Rabobank, and I caught sight a little earlier of Eric Brukink, who now rides for the Rabobank team. A lot of riders from Rabobank have come across from the Once squad. Brukink himself used to ride alongside Laurent Jalabert, as did Patrick Jonker, who's now changed to ride for the big Dutch squad and in fact opted this year for a Dutch licence.
Yes, and that's because Rabobank want him to get a high finish in the Tour de France and then say he's a Dutchman, because it's important for their sponsorship. And he'll be partnering Lutenberger. Lutenberger's seen as the number one rider for the Tour. Jonker, a very strong number two.
It'll be interesting though, Phil, when we do go to the Olympic Games in Sydney in 2000 to see just exactly which way then Patrick Jonker is going to opt to take his nationality.
He'll probably be an Aussie again, Paul.
Well, now there's a serious split developing here, because you can see the yellow car, the Mavic neutral service vehicle, moving in behind the group of about 18 to 20 riders who are in hot pursuit of the three leaders. So behind, obviously, the main field must be slipping back a little bit further. On the back of this group here, with the jersey of the national champion of Denmark, is Bjarne Riis, looking a little bit more comfortable than we've seen him for the season so far.
And Brenesto have a man up here too in Jose Jimenez. He's also having a pretty good start to the season. Everybody thought this would be a rapid descent of the Brenesto team with the withdrawal this year of Miguel Indurain, but I think nothing can be further from the truth, because they produced some pretty good performances. And now they've got a man in this chase group, and I think they'll pull back those three leaders, but you never know, because I thought they were about to catch him, and for the time being at least, Jalabert, Leblanc and Zaina have gone that little bit farther ahead.
Well, Festina in great force here. Leading him at the front there, wearing number 2, is Gilles Bouvard. Richard Virenque is in here as well, as is Pascal Hervé. And I also noted the leader of the US Postal team is in the group, Jean-Cyril Robin, the Frenchman who they've brought across onto their squad. He's also joined this group at the front. But at the back here, Phil, what a remarkable sight to see. Just on the right-hand side there, the leader of the Mercatone Uno team, Marco Pantani.
Yes, and I know everybody watching this will be very delighted too to see Pantani back in the peloton. He's had a pretty good start to the season. He got disqualified from a high finish in one event this year, but that doesn't matter. He did finish it, even though he lost his position in the end. But Pantani is going to come back, and all the riders are saying that he has virtually all of the force he had before his serious accident in October nearly 2 years ago in the Milan Turin race, when he was involved in collision with a car. Back up to the three leaders, two of the team leaders with the ones on the number, Laurent Jalabert and Luc Leblanc, are up here, and the man with them from the new Asics team. And I quite like the Asics colours, I don't know about you, but they stand out, black and blue, and that is Enrico Zaina.
These riders still haven't opened up a serious gap over the rest of the main field here, and it certainly does seem to me as if the team of Richard Virenque want to try and pull it all together. But Mauro Gianetti is in this group riding for the Française des Jeux this year, and I think this may well be him trying to close the gap down at the moment, but the work behind immediately being taken up by Alex Züller in the yellow jersey of Once. You see, he wants to make sure that any attempt to leap across this gap is nullified, which is why he's today acting as an ideal teammate for Laurent Jalabert. It's amazing to see these two riders, number 1 and number 2 in the world. They've been changing that position around since the World Championships last year, but they've no selfishness at all. They're quite prepared one day or the other to work as a team helper.
That is really something to see too. The Once team is a very happy outfit, and they enjoy each other's company. They share rooms together, and if one gets the advantage, then the other one backs off, and that is very nice to see.
Leblanc looking a little bit uncomfortable on the bike, but he hasn't really regained his form, his position since the operation on his leg a couple of years ago when he was riding for the Le Groupement team, which then became defunct just before the Tour de France. He had to have an operation after an accident as a child, which left him with one leg almost 3.5 centimetres shorter than the other, which is why he looks uncomfortable. It looks as if he's stabbing away at the pedals. He had 2 victories last year, one of those a stage victory in the Tour de France, and the other a brilliant victory in the Dauphiné Libéré on the Col de Bastille, which is an unbelievable climb just on the outskirts of Grenoble.
Well, there's little Luke. He's been a world champion. He's had an up and down career. It might be the year for another up, as he rides on the Polti squad now along with Axel Merckx, and a pretty strong team it is too. Their main target will be the Giro d'Italia, and then I'm sure Leblanc, being a Frenchman, will be in the lineup for the Tour de France. There's the long line of the survivors, who are still very much the chasers here. When you get a long thin line like that, you know they're not hanging around. In fact, they've gone flying around that corner down there. Johanna Rees is in there, useful training for him. Pantani is in there too, and extremely useful training for that man. He needs a few miles in his legs before the big tours begin. And Richard Virenque, the first time we've seen the names that we often call in the Tour de France in a move this year in the classic races, but they're still going to have to work out how they're going to bring back these 3 riders. You know, Jalabert is such a great bike rider. He's consistent throughout the whole year. That's why he's the world number 1. But he's never afraid to attack at any point of the race. He doesn't just wait, he goes for it. And yet he is one of the most closely marked riders in the race. He still seems to get away with it.
Well, there's the power that he's got when it comes to these short climbs. In fact, he's the only man in the leading group of 3 with any performances to note this year. He has 7 victories so far under his belt, including the overall victory in Paris-Nice. The 2 other riders, Enrico Zaina and Luc Leblanc, they have no major performances at all, and they're just now starting to come into form. But Zaina is also a man who'll be looking at the Tour of Italy a little bit later in the year, because not only did he finish 2nd overall last year, but he walked away with 2 stage victories.
Yes, it was quite an exciting Tour of Italy last year, and I had the pleasure of covering that every day. And I must say that Zaina looked a very good 2nd place rider in that event, but of course Tonkov was a very convincing winner, and he should be back, but he's got problems at the moment, Pavel Tonkov, because of broken bones in his wrist. He's had a training crash, and let's hope he gets himself back to form.
Now we see this descent here. It's every man taking a turn at the front, trying to keep the pace extremely high. There's a great rivalry, as we've said, and it is a lot of work being done by the Festina squad of Richard Virenque. Don't forget, this race here of the Fleche Wallonne is an uphill finish, and a very tough uphill finish indeed it is too. So if they can pull that leading group of 3 riders back together, what a remarkable sight it would be to see all the top climbers of the Tour de France fighting it out for a classic victory. Now, this is going to be a difficult situation for the leading group of 3. They're down in the bottom of the valley going alongside the River Meuse, and what will happen at the moment is these long straight roads will have them in the sights of this leading chasing group.
Well, they've got the climbs of the Huy behind them now, and it looks as though these 3 riders are just dangling very temptingly. There's still more climbs to come on the way to the Huy, as the riders try to stay clear, but they're working well together. But Zaina, well, I just don't see him making it all the way to the finish. He's not that strong, I don't think. LeBlanc will never give up. This man will just grit his teeth and hook his braces onto the back of the bike in front and will stay there. He is such a courageous fighter.
Zaina does look a lot like Claudio Chiappucci when you see him there with the helmet and the glasses on. But just take a chance here to look at the style of Luc Leblanc and how he seems to be cross-legged on the bicycle. He's twisted a little bit because of that operation on his bike, but he still has now managed to get an awful lot of power back into his body, and he is a courageous rider, and he certainly won't let Laurent Jalabert blow him off the wheel, and he'll fight his way all the way to the finish, I'm sure of that. 2
Frenchmen, 1 Italian, and the teams represented are Italian and Spanish, and all of the motorcycles are coming round the leaders now. They want the shots of the day because at last they're seeing the real stars of world cycling getting themselves out front, but not convincingly out front. And our camera's not showing us too much of the chase behind, but there are some big names back there. It's a question of whether they can sort themselves out. Now we've still got the climb of the Ben Ahin to come, and that is a short springboard. Then there's the charge down into the finish in Huy and the climb out of the town onto the finishing climb itself. There's the gap. There's still time for this gap to be closed. And there's still a lot of riders down there. Whether that's an advantage or not, I'm not so sure, Paul, because you often get riders not working together in such a big chase.
It seems to me that most of the work is being done by Festina, but they are doing a great job because that group of riders was in a very long straight line. What these riders face now, as you've said, is the Côte de Ben Ahin, and that is situated just 10 kilometres to the finish. So what they've got to try and do is survive along this valley road, because once they get to the top of Ben Ahin, it's a downhill finish right the way down into the town of Huy, which then will give them about 7 kilometres from the finish line.
And this looks like Zaina going through on the outside. The face of Luc Leblanc, he looks pretty good at the moment. Now we've cut back here to, I think it's a chase, and Michele Copilillo. He's come away from that group which contains Alex Zula, Ginetti, Chiappucci, Berzin, Pantani, Zeeberg. Quite a lot of big names back there, Bjarne Riis. But it looks as though he's trying to put matters to right, and that is also Laurent Dufaux, who had such a great Tour de France last year, and Gilles Bouvard. The Festina are taking this one pretty seriously today.
Well, he's obviously thinking about moving it a little bit closer for Michele Bartoli. There is Alex Zula from the Once squad there. He's keeping a very close eye on affairs, and he's followed there by Rafael Diaz Justo. Another very good rider, as we get a chance now to see the River Meuse, which takes it all the way up to the town of Maastricht, where it becomes the Maas.
Same river, different language.
All because of a little border, a line on the map.
Indeed. Bjarne Riis sat there seemingly training for the day, and Riis has had no big performances this year yet, but he's following his own training schedule, and it looks as though his form is coming exactly as he wants it to. He's in the first group on the road behind this trio of leaders here. Zaina having a little sly glance just to check out where they are. We're looking there at the legs too of the Telecom rider, Bjarne Riis. Well, I wonder how long he's going to keep that Danish champion's jersey, because he's had a couple of years in it now, and he's very much the best bike rider in Denmark at the minute.
Riders here now on the slopes, I think, of the Ben Ahin, or maybe there's just a small climb beforehand, but Jalabert, once they get to the uphill section of this breakaway, decides that he's the man who has the power, so he just goes there, doesn't ask for help from anybody at all, gets that big gear of his in, and then swings across as we speak and says, "Come on, Luke, you're the lucky one."
Well, I'm not so sure about that, Paul, because they're really under pressure here to keep this break away, as Zaina rather reluctantly goes through second wheel, and even less reluctant, I would think, to take up the race lead. He looks to be the weak link to me, Enrico. But even so, he's a good rider, as we know that, and he climbs pretty well too. These are strange little hills, though, here in the Ardennes. They're not like the long climbs of the Tour de France or the Tour of Italy. They're short, they're sharp, and they are pretty steep, and they really hurt the legs. This was a course that Stephen Roach used to love riding.
Well, it's strange because despite the fact all three of these riders seem to have been doing an awful lot of work in the group, they've never stretched their lead out very much more than 30 seconds. Jalabert lets the other two go to the front just to see what the situation is like, and once he feels that they're not going fast enough, moves to the front and accelerates again.
Well, this acceleration, I think, has hurt everybody, because I don't see Zaina gone. That acceleration has taken Zaina away here on the Côte de Ben Ahin. And in fact, I think that's what Jalabert was trying to set up. That's why he manoeuvred them both through, and then he's gone through with a very rapid acceleration. Now, Luc Leblanc seems to have recovered, but look, right down there, I couldn't see him.
Well, he really got blown out there in every sense of the term. That's quite remarkable. He didn't look that bad to me, but you know, when Laurent Jalabert opens up the speed, it's very difficult to stay there. Now, what's happening now is a little bit of a psychological move here, because Jalabert thought he could ride away, I think, probably from both of them, which is why Luc Leblanc has come to the front to say, OK, you've got rid of Zaina, but I'm not too bad. You're going to have to try a lot harder than that if you want to drop me. And he'll go to the front and he'll try and settle into a pace that is comfortable enough for himself, but he'll be waiting all the time for another attack from Laurent Jalabert, who looks very comfortable, Phil. The power of this man is quite remarkable over these Ardennes climbs.
Well, Luc Leblanc is going to be a much tougher nut to crack here, and Jalabert knows it. He's not going to object if Leblanc wants to set up the pace, but now he's going to go through and give him another minor acceleration. And Leblanc, in fact, he also looks a little bit raggy, but then that is his style. He quite often looks as though he's under pressure when indeed he isn't. He just has this style which always gives you the impression he's sprinting for the back wheel of the rider in front.
Well, he's looking for all kinds of energy there to stay with Laurent Jalabert. 1 kilometre to the summit now of the Benahin, and I would think that's going to put the riders just a little over 10 kilometres to go to the finish line. But still, they haven't stretched out their lead, because a lot of work is being done in that back group by the Festina squad, and the lead hovering over the 35-second mark at the moment. So it's gone out 5 seconds or so, and now we've got at the back of the group the Mercatoni team deciding that they want to try and pull it back together, possibly for something for a preparation for Marco Pantani. Sitting in second position was Michele Bartoli, and again a little move by Mauro Gianetti going down the right hand side for the Française des Jeux.
Well, just like Rolf Sorensen was a professional at 20 years of age, so too is Luc Leblanc, and so he's had a long career. He's now coming up this year, he'll be 31 years of age, Luke, and he's still riding pretty good. But this is the reaction still coming from the field, and they're going to have to sort something out pretty quickly now if they're going to do something. This really is the last chance to break up the chase and get across to the leaders. Gianetti is an excellent classic rider, knows that he must make his move pretty soon now, and he's shadowed, of course, by Alex Zula.
Still, every time we come here, it looks as if Luc Leblanc is suffering to stay in the wheel there. There is Enrico Zaina, I think, about to be caught by this chasing group. A lot of work being done by the MG team. Richard Virenque taking a little bit of a back seat now as the pressure starts to go on the last slopes of this climb.
I think that's Zeeberg, sorry, not Zeeberg, he's in the yellow here, just off to our left. The rider at the front is Zaina coming back, as the Lotto boys try to get across now and close it right down again. And that is Enrico Zaina, who's come back into the group. And in fact, this is a big serious effort here now to get something going to bring back those two leaders. And there is Mauro Gianetti, had a great World Championships last year. And that looks like Benoit Saumen, who is also in this breakaway here.
The Frenchman who's come across to the Lotto squad, looking to try and open up the gap a little bit, try and get across there, try and split this group, which at one time was around about 18, 19 riders, but still they can't close down on the gap of the two leaders. And then we look down the road there, you can see it is still hovering at the 30-second mark, Phil. They really can't make very much impression at all. But what's happening behind now, in fact, is that group is starting to splinter.
And that is Beat Zeeberg in the yellow, who's trying to go away. I got the feeling he was here to try and set up the finish, you know, for Marco Pantani, because it's certainly the finish for Pantani. He has that great acceleration on steep climbs, and if he can get up there with this group, then he should be able to do something in the sprint. But just now, there's no real organisation here now. It's everybody doing a hard turn on the front, and then there's a hesitation, and that's why Zula's in there trying to break up the reaction, and hoping that eventually they'll all calm down and let these two get on with it, because I'm quite sure that Alex will be confident now that Laurent Jalabert can take over at the finish and beat Luc Leblanc. Well, I'm not so sure, but I'm sure that these two know the answer to that right now.
Well, what's happening now is they've got to put as much effort as they can into getting to the bottom of the climb, because there's still quite a long way to go, and there is a chance, as always, that that group can come back. It's an interesting position though, as always, for Luc Leblanc. You can see that left leg of his, he kicks it out a little bit. It's really difficult for him. He had an awful hard time trying to get over that accident that he had as a child and then the operation back in 1994. And to come back and be competitive after all of those problems really is quite remarkable. Completely different style though when you compare it to that of Laurent Jalabert, who looks quite perfect. And as always, he reminds me of a Sean Kelly, the strength that Kelly had in this kind of classic. He sits very firmly on the bike, the top part of his body hardly moving at all. When he does get out of the saddle, the power just coming out of his thighs.
Yes, I know that Lance Armstrong doesn't like being compared with Greg LeMond, but I don't think Jalabert has any objection to being compared with Sean Kelly. They do seem to have very similar careers, and Jalabert once said if he can do half as much as Sean Kelly did, he'll be very happy. But he's well on his way to doing that. And don't forget, this year too, he's also had a nasty tumble at the finish of the Milan-San Remo Classic, and that brought back memories of his nasty crash a couple of years ago in the Tour de France at Armentières, and it doesn't seem to have affected his nerve at all, Paul. He's still riding as good as ever.
Oh, certainly. There we got a chance there to glimpse Eric Brooking and one or two of the other riders in this group. So the group has come back together despite all of those attacks, and now I could see there sitting on the back Marco Pantani, and just dropping back you can see the yellow jersey of Beard Seberg. He's looking to see what the situation is with his leader. He'll try and pull it back together, because if they come together at the bottom of this climb with the form that Marco Pantani showed in the Tour of Murcia, he could in fact win a sprint at the top of a climb like the Mur de Huy.
Well, these two have really taken this race to everybody else today, but they've never got away from them, so they've had to show a great degree of composure and indeed strength as Leblanc continues to share the work here with Laurent Jalabert. Leblanc comes from the Limoges area of France. He's a Limousin, and that's the same area where the great Frenchman Raymond Poulidor came from, the eternal second in the Tour de France. He never even got to wear the yellow jersey in that great race. He always found somebody, usually by the name of Jacques Anquetil, that spoiled a brilliant career and many wins in the big Tour. Anyway, Limousin, Leblanc is going well. You know, he didn't get a win. He turned pro back in 1987, but he never won a race till he joined the team of Cyril Guimard in 1990, and in that season he picked up 4 wins, and he's never really looked back since as far as his form goes, although he has had some fairly rotten luck one way or another with crashes and team collapses.
He's had the French national champions jersey on his shoulders. He's had the yellow jersey at the Tour de France. He's been eliminated at the Tour de France, in fact finishing last on the stage to Alpe d'Huez as the French national champion. But over the plateau part here, we're stuck above the city of Huy before the riders are looking now for the descent down to the valley of Le Meuse, and then they will see for the last time if they're going to have a chance of pulling back those 2 riders. You can see here just what sort of pressure is being put on in that group. The gaps starting to appear all the time whenever the pressure goes on at the front, but never at all is it looking like splitting.
No, they're using a good type of glue today, I think that's for sure. As we race down towards that valley now, the sun is high in the sky again. The race speed a little bit down on the speed of last year so far, when this race was won by Lance Armstrong. The average speed about 1.5 kilometres slower, but it's not any short on action, because these 2 riders cannot feel safe, because the race behind hasn't stopped, and it really is a bunch of stars behind. Riders who've all won big bike races, and yet they still can't organise themselves to bring back these 2 riders. That says a lot for the makeup of these 2 men, who also know they're taking a bit of a gamble here.
Interesting to note, Phil, in that group behind, in fact, one man who's starting to make a comeback this year, Pascal Lino, riding for now Big Mat Aubervilliers, having been abroad riding for several teams, looking for some kind of form, the kind of form that gave him the yellow jersey in the Tour de France, and he's riding in the big orange and red jersey, if you can spot him when we go back to the main field afterwards. A good rider, looking again to try and come back and prove that the performances he had at the earlier part of his career were no flash in the pan, and again he can be a consistent rider when it comes to an event like the Tour de France or even the Fleche Wallonne today.
Lino briefly a yellow jersey in the Tour de France when he rode for RMO, the same year that Richard Virenque came to the fore as well, and since then Virenque has gone on to win the King of the Mountains 3 times, and he is in that chase group along with Lino today, but they haven't found the answer yet as to how they're going to pull back these 2. And a little word to each other. Well, they'll have no problem with the language at least, and I would love to know what they said just then.
Well, I think a little word of encouragement saying that, okay, you've tried to get rid of me, you've got rid of Enrico Zaina, let's just work together, let's keep this thing going, because if we can stay away from that leading group, at least the worst one of us can do is finish in second position. A chance there just to see the machinery on that look bike provided to the Once team, and again, Jalabert, he just looks so powerful when you compare him to the move there of Luc Leblanc.
And one or two of the Rabobank team latched onto the back of this group.
So Seberg now in the yellow jersey of Mercatini, deciding that he's going to try and pull it back together. There's Martin den Bakker, the champion of Holland, but two Once riders in the group here. That in second position is Alex Zülle, doing the job which is his today to make sure that there's no concerted effort in the chase behind, and he's joined by his teammate Rosta.
And Seberg still prepared to sacrifice himself in the hope that his teammate Pantani will come good at the end. He's riding very solidly at the front today. Seberg is such an underrated rider. He turns in some great performances, third this year in Tirreno Adriatico, and that a perfectly good performance from him, and the Swiss can always expect a good ride out of him. Good to see Bjarne Riis back in the action. Spent a lot of his time this year training at the Club La Santa in Lanzarote, which is that lovely island about 80 miles off the North African coast in the Atlantic Ocean, and he went there with a lot of cyclists, and they're very impressed by the way he went training. He climbed mountains with them, then he sprinted away, went to the top of the mountain, used a freewheel back down, rejoin them, and then do it all over again. And some of those riders he left, by the way, were professionals.
Most certainly knows exactly how to prepare for the Tour de France, and I think he's right on schedule at the moment as we go up to that great event in a couple of months' time. Good to see Bjarne Riis putting himself back up at the top of the list of favourites to win the Tour de France, because it's really going to be an open event this year after the retirement of Miguel Indurain during the winter.
But you know, sooner or later, Laurent Jalabert is going to make a serious attempt at the overall classification of the Tour de France. He's done it once, yes, and he's finished right up there. But he was a little confused about the difference between stage wins, the green jersey and the yellow jersey on that occasion. But clearly since then he's developed into a real all-round bike rider and a possible Tour winner, I think. Anyway, we're on the way down. This is the tricky old road now, taking us out onto the highway again, down into the valley, and look at this now, he's gone for it on the descent. Jalabert found he couldn't do it going uphill, so he's making Luc Leblanc sprint back up to win on the downhill. Little bit cheeky.
Clever little move, because you wouldn't expect just swinging onto this road here to attack like that, but Jalabert just waited to see if there was going to be a moment's hesitation by Luc Leblanc, and he almost caught him unawares. They're now at the bottom of the descent of the Benahin. They've got about 7 kilometres to go, and in fact, Phil, it seems as if they've stretched their lead out now, because we're getting information that it's gone up to 58 seconds, so it could be going in the favour of these two riders, but still it's a very flat part of the course until we get to the bottom now of the Mur de Huy, which is then a 1.5 kilometre climb up to the finish line.
But you know, I think we've probably gone through the psychological barrier now, because a lot of those riders in that back group thought that they would finish the job off on the climb. They haven't done so, and now they've lost a bit of heart, and they're probably not contributing very much to the chase. They're now starting to say to themselves, well, third in Fleche Wallonne won't be a bad result either, and these two might now be safe. The group is moving away from them, and it's looking around about 1 minute is the difference in the time gap. And the roads, apart from the finish now, are relatively easy, but it is a very steep climb up to the finish. Did you ride Fleche Wallonne, Paul?
I did, in fact, but I didn't manage to ride all 3 ascents of the Mur de Huy.
Well done, but you started, that's more than I did. Anyway, back to Luc Leblanc, the former world champion, the former French champion and stage winner in the Tour de France. 6th, by the way, in the Tour of Spain a couple of years back as well. And for our Irish viewers, 6th in the Nissan Classic, and that is where Luc Leblanc was a very popular figure in that great race in Ireland, which is sadly no more. The Tour de France, though, going to Ireland next year for the first 2 days of racing, and that will be something very, very special indeed.
These two riders now getting down to the serious business of deciding, I think, who is going to win today's Fleche Wallonne, because another psychological factor for the riders in that chasing group behind is they have to think that in a couple of days' time they have to get out again and race in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Now, they won't want to put that little bit of extra effort in today, because that might rob them of winning a World Cup race, which is what Liège-Bastogne-Liège is. Although I've always esteemed Fleche Wallonne to be a classic, because of the World Cup situation now, it doesn't have the World Cup tag as it should really do.
No, it's a great pity, but you see that left-hand corner again. Jalabert accelerated out of it very quick and has forced Luc Leblanc to use energy up to chase him down. Once he's caught him, Jalabert eases up again. He's just making sure he's making him ride exactly on the top end of his effort today. And now he's gone behind him again as we head into Huy, and very shortly we'll make the turn that will take us up the wall. And it really is very, very steep. It's around about 20 to 25% the climb. It is very steep.
Well, it's going to be an operation now for Jalabert to keep accelerating when he can, because he has the acceleration of a sprinter, and every time he does that, it's going to hurt Luc Leblanc a little bit. But I think in the back of Jalabert's mind, he must also be thinking about the fact that Luc Leblanc is a very good climber indeed. This is a strange time of the year, because normally Leblanc would be looking at the Tour of Italy and the Tour de France, but you can never underestimate a climber, especially on a finish like the Mur de Huy, which is why I think we keep seeing these consistent accelerations like this one here from Laurent Jalabert. But Luc Leblanc comes alongside just to show him psychologically that he's fine. It's going to go down to one of us, and I'm not as bad as you think I am.
Well, I'll tell you, we could see Leblanc's face there riding behind Jalabert. Jalabert couldn't see it, and Leblanc is plainly suffering now. But you've got to hand it to him to force himself through and to continue setting the pace with Laurent Jalabert. He is a very, very good rider indeed. He wants Jalabert to come through now, and right now Jalabert is not interested as we pass under the 1 kilometre, I don't know what you call it anymore. It's a kite on the side of a balloon, but at least you can see where it is. And now, as we head up towards the start of the climb, it's just after a right flick, and then the mountain starts. And I think Jalabert has done exactly what he intended to do here, and that's put Luc Leblanc in front, and then very shortly try to finish him off. There's the right filter. Now we start the climb, and it's just about the next corner, Paul, where you actually see the wall. And that, I would think, to riders, if you're not feeling good, must make you feel pretty terrible.
It is, there it is. You can see the first part, but this is not the steepest part of the climb at all. It gets steeper than this. Both of the riders now on the small chainring. Luc Leblanc, all he can hope for at the moment is that he can set a speed fast enough to prevent Laurent Jalabert attacking him. What he wants to try and do is keep a speed so that Jalabert stays behind him, and then when Jalabert does eventually attack, then he can get across onto his slipstream. Here now, the race starting to get a little bit steeper, but Leblanc all over his bike, grovelling at the moment to try and keep the speed high. Just look how calm and collected Jalabert looks. He hasn't been flustered at all so far. It's exactly the same position as we saw him in 30 kilometres ago.
Well, just round the left-hand bend here is the best place to attack if you've got the strength. It's still a little way to the summit, but it's very steep as we go off to the left, and it looks as though Jalabert is almost waiting, and he's having to hold himself back here. Now, it was on this climb last year where Lance Armstrong rode so very well, and sadly Lance not with us now, but we hope he'll be back soon. And that's where he's gone. He took one good look at the face of Luc Leblanc. You see how steep he got just there? If you've got the strength, that's the place to do it. And Luc Leblanc, well, there was no resistance at all. He knew that's exactly what Jalabert would do, and he knew that was the end of Fleche Wallonne for him. Even so, he's going to get his finest finish in this event, and it's good to see Leblanc back on the winning trail as well. Let's go up and join the man who has animated this race over the last kilometres today. The breakaway which never really got away until the last 10 kilometres, and this was the rider almost single-handedly who controlled the whole affair. First of all, he rid himself of Enrico Zaina on the Benahin, and now he's rid himself of Luc Leblanc on the wall itself. Nice round of applause from the Belgians. And another day's gone by, another Fleche Wallonne has gone by, when a Belgian hasn't come away to victory. It's now 10 years since the victory of Claude Coquillon, and the Belgians will hope one day they can find themselves a new climber. Here's the main field, and Pantani is still in there, but he's still on the back, and yet hasn't quite worked out why his teammates doing all the pacemaking up front, be it Zeeberg. Back to the front of the race, the yellow jersey of Once, and Laurent Jalabert gets another major win to his career. His season continues. It's win number 8 this season alone. And yes, he punches the sky. And look at the gap. Luc Leblanc sat up there, knew second was good, and has given the best part of half a minute here to Laurent Jalabert to allow him his few moments of glory in solitude.
Quite a remarkable performance, the second victory he's had in this event in 2 years. He wasn't here last year after injury. Luc Leblanc, I think, will be satisfied with second place, but he could do nothing at all to challenge that attack by Laurent Jalabert on the slopes. The main group coming up now, and in fact they're being led by Alex Zülle. So Pantani hasn't managed his challenge at the top of the climb here. Zülle will come up here looking to try and take third place, and there is Pascalino back in sixth. Pantani in the yellow jersey there, he's looking at about fifth at the moment.
And Bartoli just in front of him. And Bartoli, the winner last year of the Tour of Flanders. So Zülle gets third for Once, more World Cup points and more ranking points rather for him. So the top two in the world still continue to have a private battle there as the wheels come over the line. Pantani is fifth, Pascalino, good ride, sixth place for him. And seventh, Andrea Noah, who came to the fore in my eyes in the Tour of Italy last year and now seems to be settling in as a very promising rider indeed. Well, there he is in the winner's enclosure, as it were, Laurent Jalabert, and still not talking to the Frenchman Luc Leblanc. He just took one good look at his face here, could see there was going to be no resistance at all. And just look at this for a powerful acceleration. His face giving absolutely nothing away. Little puffing of the cheeks as he accelerates. The camera belies the steepness of this climb at around about 25%. And it climbs all the way up to the line. There's no respite now. Leblanc just happy to be there in second place. Jalabert, being the true professional, taking no chances at all and just going to make sure that nobody was creeping up on him as he crosses the line with a two-arm salute for victory in the Fleche Wallonne. Well, he's done it before, but the latest one always feels good. Here he is now talking to a French commentator, so we're going to ask Paul Sherwin to tell us exactly what Laurent Jalabert is saying as he gets the congratulations. The thing is, he always rides well here, and it's always good preparation for Liège-Bastogne-Liège. So let's find out what he thinks.
Well, it's true. At the start of this year's Fleche Wallonne, I've already won it once. It's a race that you always want to win because it's one of the most important races on the international calendar. It's also true that at the start of the race today, I didn't feel really all that good, which is probably why you didn't see very much of me. That probably helped me win at the end.
Well, we certainly saw plenty of him at the end, and so did everybody else in the best possible position, because this now makes it 2 wins in 3 possible attempts for Laurent Jalabert. And now he's got the first part of the double. He'll look forward to riding in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Here's the result then. Laurent Jalabert wins today the 200 kilometres in 5 hours and 7 minutes, 19 seconds better than Luc Leblanc, 50 seconds better than a pack of 18 riders. Alex Zülle, Michele Bartoli, Marco Pantani, he's back. Pascalino and Andrea Noah, they made the top 7.